Dear brothers and sisters, welcome back to our Saint Stories channel. Today I invite you on a journey unlike any other, a journey back in time to the rugged shores of Norway, where icy winds roared and Viking ships ruled the seas. In this land of fierce warriors and ancient gods, a man rose above the rest, not just as a king but as a beacon of light, faith and transformation. His name, Saint Olaf. Have you ever wondered how a Viking warrior, born into a world of conquest and pagan traditions, could become a saint honored by the Catholic Church? How did a man shaped by the brutality of battle find the courage to embrace the teachings of Christ and dedicate his life to spreading the gospel? In today's episode, we'll uncover the remarkable story of Saint Olaf, a man who wielded both sword and cross in his quest to unite Norway under the banner of Christianity. Together, we'll explore his early days as a young warrior, his life-changing encounter with the Christian faith, and his courageous mission to bring the light of Christ to his people. But that's not all. We'll delve into his reign as King of Norway, the sacrifices he made for his faith, and the extraordinary events surrounding his martyrdom and canonization. By the end of this journey, you'll see why St. Olaf's life is not just a historical tale, but a powerful testament to God's transformative grace. So grab a warm drink, settle in, and let us walk together through the untold story of the Viking who became a saint. To truly understand the remarkable journey of Saint Olaf, we must first step into the world he was born into, a land of untamed beauty and fierce ambition. The year was 995 AD, and in the heart of Norway, surrounded by towering fjords and icy seas, a child was born into the lineage of Viking chieftains. His name was Olaf Haraldsson. From the start, Olaf's life was destined to be anything but ordinary. The Viking age was at its peak, a time when strength and bravery defined a man's worth. Young Olaf was no stranger to these values. Raised in a culture steeped in heroic sagas and the worship of Norse gods, his boyhood was filled with tales of Odin and Thor, gods of war and thunder. These stories shaped his early years, preparing him for a life of conquest and adventure. As a teenager, Olaf joined the ranks of Viking warriors, embarking on raids across Europe. Imagine the sight: longboats slicing through stormy waters, shields gleaming in the pale Nordic sun, and the fierce cries of warriors echoing through the air. For Olaf, these raids were not just about plunder. They were a rite of passage, a proving ground where he honed his skills in battle and leadership. But amidst the chaos of this warrior's life, there was something more stirring within him, though he may not have recognized it yet. Even as he led his men with a sword in hand, God was quietly planting the seeds of faith in Olaf's heart, preparing him for a calling far greater than he could have ever imagined. Olaf's journey was just beginning, and the transformation awaiting him would change not only his life, but the destiny of an entire nation. As Olaf Haraldsson's journey as a Viking warrior continued, his path took him far beyond the icy fjords of Norway. During his travels across Europe, God began to weave his divine plan in the heart of this young warrior. It was in these distant lands, where cultures and faiths intersected, that Olaf encountered something that would change the course of his life forever: the light of Christianity. While serving as a mercenary and raider, Olaf found himself in Normandy, a region already deeply influenced by Christian faith. Here, amidst the towering cathedrals and the vibrant life of Christian communities, Olaf witnessed a stark contrast to the pagan traditions of his homeland. The reverence of the people, their prayers, and the beauty of the sacraments must have stirred something deep within him. It was during this time that Olaf received the sacrament of baptism. Can you imagine the moment? This warrior, accustomed to wielding a sword in battle, knelt humbly before God as holy water was poured over his head. In that sacred act, Olaf was born anew, not just as a man of faith, but as a servant of Christ. This was not merely a ceremonial conversion. For Olaf, this moment marked the beginning of a profound transformation. The warrior who had once sought glory through conquest now sought a higher purpose. His heart, once hardened by the struggles of life, began to soften as he embraced the teachings of Christ. But this was no easy path. Returning to a pagan homeland as a Christian meant facing opposition, misunderstanding, and even danger. Yet Olaf was undeterred. His baptism had ignited a fire within him, a desire to share the truth and beauty of the gospel with his people. Through his conversion, Olaf came to understand that true courage was not only found on the battlefield but also in the willingness to surrender oneself to God's will. Little did he know that this newfound faith would lead him to an even greater mission, one that would define his legacy for centuries to come. Having embraced the Christian faith, Olaf Haraldsson returned to Norway with a heart full of purpose and a vision that went beyond the ambitions of a typical Viking warrior. His mission was no longer about raids or conquests for personal glory. Instead, he sought to bring unity, peace, and the light of Christianity to his homeland, a bold and divine calling in a land still deeply rooted in pagan traditions. When Olaf arrived in Norway around 1015, he faced a fragmented kingdom, divided among local chieftains and clans, each vying for power. But Olaf's leadership qualities, sharpened through years of battle and bolstered by his newfound faith, shone brightly. He gathered support from those who believed in his vision of a united Norway under one God and one king. Picture the scenes, fiery speeches under the open sky, Olaf's commanding presence as he rallied men from villages and towns, his conviction unshaken as he proclaimed his intention to unify the nation, not just politically, but spiritually. His charisma and determination inspired loyalty, even among those hesitant to accept Christianity. Through both strategic alliances and military victories, Olaf consolidated his power, eventually claiming the throne of Norway. But unlike many rulers of his time, Olaf's kingship was not marked by tyranny or self-serving ambition. Instead, he saw his role as a sacred responsibility entrusted to him by God. He believed he was called to lead his people not just as a king, but as a shepherd guiding his flock towards salvation. Olaf's coronation marked a pivotal moment in Norwegian history. The crown on his head was not merely a symbol of earthly authority, it represented his commitment to establishing a kingdom rooted in Christian values. As king, Olaf's mission to bring Christ to the heart of his people would take on new and extraordinary dimensions. The warrior had become a king, and the king was now a servant of God. With a strong hand and a faithful heart, Olaf was ready to lead Norway into a new era, one that would forever transform its spiritual and cultural landscape. Once Olaf Haraldsson ascended to the throne, he began to pour his energy into a mission that burned brightly in his heart: the Christianization of Norway. As a king and a man of deepening faith, Olaf saw it as his divine calling to lead his people not only politically but also spiritually. His reign was to be a reflection of Christ's teachings, where justice, mercy, and truth would shape the very fabric of his kingdom. Olaf's missionary work was bold and unwavering. Traveling across Norway, he worked to replace the remnants of paganism with the light of the gospel. Imagine him riding through rugged mountain passes, arriving in remote villages, and addressing gatherings of curious and often skeptical Norwegians. He spoke with conviction about the God who created them, the Savior who died for them, and the eternal life promised to all who believe. But Olaf knew words alone would not be enough. His efforts were accompanied by action. He supported the construction of churches, small but sacred places where people could gather to worship God and receive the sacraments, These churches became sanctuaries of hope, rising as symbols of the kingdom's new Christian identity. Olaf also sought to educate his people about the faith. He encouraged clergy to travel alongside him, teaching the truths of the gospel and baptizing those who were willing to accept Christ. These moments must have been powerful, men, women and children receiving the waters of baptism in cold streams, their faces reflecting the joy of newfound faith. However, Olaf's mission was not without resistance. Many Norwegians clung tightly to their ancient pagan beliefs, and some chieftains openly opposed him, viewing Christianity as a threat to their traditions and autonomy. Yet Olaf remained steadfast. He balanced diplomacy with firmness, ensuring that his message of salvation reached even the most hardened hearts. Olaf also reformed the laws of his kingdom to reflect Christian principles, focusing on justice and compassion. For instance, he sought to protect the weak and marginalized, ensuring fairness in governance. These reforms were not merely administrative, they were rooted in his desire to make Norway a land that honored God in every aspect of life. Through his missionary work and leadership, Olaf demonstrated that faith and courage go hand in hand. He knew that the road to building God's kingdom on earth would be challenging, but he trusted in divine providence. His efforts planted seeds of faith that would bear fruit for generations to come, leaving an enduring legacy of hope and redemption. Every saint's journey is marked by moments of profound sacrifice, and for St. Olaf, his final act of courage and faith became the pinnacle of his story. His martyrdom not only sealed his legacy, but also transformed him into a beacon of hope and faith for generations to come. After years of missionary work and leadership, opposition to Olaf's rule reached its peak. His Christian reforms, though grounded in love and justice, were met with fierce resistance from pagan chieftains and rival factions who sought to reclaim their power. These forces united against him, forcing Olaf into exile in 1028. Yet even in this period of hardship, Olaf's faith never wavered. He spent his time in prayer, reflection and preparation, trusting that God would call him back to his homeland when the time was right. In 1030, Olaf returned to Norway with a small but loyal force, determined to reclaim his throne and continue his mission of spreading the gospel. His return was not driven by a thirst for power, but by a deep conviction that his work for Christ was not yet finished. However, the path back to his people was fraught with danger. The decisive moment came at the Battle of Stiklestad. On that fateful day, Olaf faced an overwhelming army of his enemies. Despite the odds, he stood firm, wielding not only his sword, but the courage born of his faith. As the battle raged, Olaf fought valiantly, but he was ultimately struck down and killed. He died not as a king clinging to worldly power, but as a servant of God, offering his life for the faith he so dearly loved. Olaf's death, however, was not the end of his story. Almost immediately, reports of miracles began to spread. Pilgrims who visited his grave claimed to experience healing and divine intervention. These signs of God's grace affirmed what many already believed. Olaf had given his life as a martyr for Christ, and his soul now rested in the glory of heaven. Just 1 year after his death, Olaf was canonized as a saint by the Bishop of Nidaros, making him one of the first saints of Scandinavia. His grave became a place of pilgrimage, and his legacy as a Christian king and martyr inspired countless believers. St. Olaf became a symbol of faith, unity and perseverance, not only for Norway but for the entire Church. Even today, St. Olaf's story reminds us that the ultimate victory lies not in earthly triumphs, but in the willingness to lay down our lives for Christ. His martyrdom speaks to the power of faith, and his canonization stands as a testament to God's ability to transform even the fiercest of warriors into instruments of peace and grace. St. Olaf's story is one of transformation, courage, and unwavering faith. From a fierce Viking warrior to a devoted Christian king and finally a martyr for the gospel, his life reminds us of God's power to work through anyone to bring about his divine plan. St Olaf's legacy continues to inspire us to trust in God's will, to stand firm in our faith, and to live lives of service to others. Thank you for joining us today on this incredible journey through the life of St Olaf. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of the saints. Be sure to check out our other videos to deepen your understanding of our Catholic faith and the lives of those who lived it heroically. Until next time, may God bless you and see you in our next video.